Welcome back to QAV America, Tony. Two Australian value investors talking about investing in the US market. I put that in there for new listeners. How are you, Tony?
I'm well, thanks, Cam. Yeah, just finished the hour and a half on stocks in Australia. It's fun to see you again. Good to
Yeah.
see you again, I should say.
Well, I don't really have any sort of broad news. As we say every week on this show, it's in such a state of flux, the US market, with tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are up, tariffs are down. It's it's really hard to make any sense of it, and so we don't try. I mean, we just
Hmm.
for people that are new to QAV, what we try and do is look at the fundamentals of individual businesses and try and find something that is a bargain, something that we think is generating good cash flow, but we can buy it at a bargain for one reason or another. And then on this show, I pick one each week that is on our US buy list, and I talk about it for half an hour and why it's on our buy list. And this week, I'm doing a company called Sasol, which kind of sound. We were just talking about The Godfather um, on our Australian show, and there's a character in one of the Godfather films, Joey Sasso. I can't remember.
The third one, part three.
Is it? Right.
Yeah,
Joey Sasso?
Andy Garcia. Is it Andy
Okay.
Garcia? I think, yeah. Saza.
Oh, yeah. Joey Sasso. Yeah, yeah. It's, well, he's plays Vincenzo Corleone.
Oh,
He's
sorry.
Sonny's,
He kills
yeah,
Joey Saza, yeah.
Joey Sasso. That's right. Yeah. He's saying something bad about Michael Corleone. Yeah, yeah. Isn't that, yeah, I can't remember the name of the actor who played him. Anyway, not to get
Yeah,
distracted.
I can too.
Sasol.
Yeah.
SSL is the ticker code for Sasol. And you were on our Australian show, you were talking about anti-woke ETFs.
Mm.
And I said, well, I'm going to talk about an anti-woke company in some ways. This company is, what a story they've got behind them. They're a South African coal liquefaction company. And they do other things, but that's mainly their background and where most of their revenue still comes from today. I knew absolutely nothing about coal liquefaction. Don't think I'd ever even heard of coal liquefaction before I started this, but now I know a little bit about it, so I can talk to you about it. But this company was started in the 50s in apartheid South Africa, mostly as a way of securing their energy independence because they don't have a lot of oil in South Africa and they were under economic sanctions. And so they were finding it difficult to buy oil. So they needed to figure out how to take what they did have, which was coal, and turn it into petrol and chemicals that could be used for everything that they needed petroleum for. And so Sasol was founded in a dusty little town called Sasolburg, which was created in
Oh.
1954 to provide housing and facilities for Sasol employees. There's a couple of different ways to take coal and turn it into liquid petroleum, essentially, synthetic gas or synthetic petroleum. And it was first discovered by German chemists in the early 1900s. And there's the main way of doing it is called the Fischer-Tropsch process, after the names of the two Germans who developed it. Fischer, who was not a Nazi at the time, but became one later. Tropsch got the hell out of there in the late 20s and ended up in the US, but Fischer stuck around. Basically, you can take coal and force it to give up its liquid hydrocarbons. One way is to just make it really, really hot, and the other way is to pulverize it. and then put it under huge amounts of pressure. So without going into too much detail, the first way is what's called the indirect route, which is the Fischer-Tropsch method. You gasify the coal, creating synthetic gas, or syngas as it's known. You basically heat it up to 1300 degrees Celsius or 2370 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty hot. You ever stood inside next to a furnace like that?
Oh, good question. No. I've done firefighter training when I was working at Shell. It gets pretty hot doing that, so, but not a furnace hot.
I have stood near furnaces when, in my Microsoft days, in Victoria, we had some coal industry clients. I can't remember who they were now, but I remember doing a tour of some of their facilities, and I remember being next to a furnace. Actually, no, this wasn't coal, it was steel. They were melting steel, which is about the same temperature
Ooh,
that it takes to gasify coal. And I remember, being in the room next to the room where the furnace
yeah,
was
right.
on, and it was insane. It was like standing close to a sun. It was so hot. It was absolutely bonkers. Terrific experience. Highly recommend it if you ever get the chance. Stand next to a steel furnace. Anyway, so they heat it up, then they clean it, run it over an iron or cobalt-based catalyst that stitches the molecules back together in a way that you end up with wax, just these hydrocarbons that are a wax, and then you crack the wax and you end up with diesel and naphtha. And this was a big deal in Nazi Germany. Believe it or not, Hitler struggled to get his hands on enough oil during World War II, so not a lot of oil wells in Germany. So it became a huge part of German industry during World War II. CTL, as it's known, coal to liquid, provided 92% of Germany's air fuel and over 50% of its petroleum supply in the 1940s. But then when they lost the war, it sort of got a bad rap because some Germans believed that they lost the war because they couldn't produce enough fuel out of that. Had nothing to do with the fact that the Americans and the Russians joined up and they just got summarily defeated and Stalin crushed them at Stalingrad, but that's another story. Then the other way of doing it is called hydrogenation, the direct route, it's called, where you pulverize the coal, mix it with heavy oil and hydrogen under 300 bar. For people like me who don't know what that means, I know you've been to at least 300 bars in your time, but that's a different story. 1 bar equals atmospheric pressure. So 300 bars is 300 times 14.5 psi, so 4,350 psi, comparable to the water jet cutting pressure used on stone, basically. Then you strip out the sulfur and the oxygen. It's quicker, but it's a pretty harsh way of doing it. So you do this, and it's actually very expensive to do this. The output cost sits north of $50 US per barrel. But, you have to do it. If you don't have access to liquid oil, you can't get it out of the ground. You just have to suck it up, which was apartheid South Africa, apparently.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask that because there's been some coal seam gas companies in Australia over the years, and they've never taken off. And I think one of the reasons was it was just uneconomical. The process sounds fine, and we have lots of coal, but they never survived. But I guess if you're in apartheid South Africa, you need to do it.
Or Nazi Germany, yeah.
Or Nazi Germany. But
And
why is it still going now then if it's South Africa doesn't have the sanctions?
It's huge. It's turned into a absolutely mega company that produces a ton of this sort of stuff, and I don't know, they must be able to justify it economically. So they produce roughly 2 barrels of liquid for every ton of coal, plus buckets of CO2, sulfur, and ash, which is where the anti-woke side of this comes in. So Sasol's main operation is called the Secunda complex, and it produces roughly 150,000 barrels per day, which is a lot of oil, I guess. China also does a lot of CTL on a much smaller volume per
Sorry,
facility.
did you say 150 barrels a day?
150,000 barrels a
Yeah,
day.
thank you. Sorry. Okay.
150 kbbl per day. China produces a little bit out of CTL too. There was a lot of CTL operations running in the US, but they kind of got replaced with shale, I
Yeah,
think,
right. Hmm.
which is, as we know, not as economical as sucking oil out of the ground either, but is lower cost
Yeah.
per barrel than pulling up coal and crushing it, apparently, or cooking it. So, yes, it works. These guys are the kings at it, Sasol, but really bad for the environment. So, what else can I tell you? The founder, Etienne Rousseau, started the company in 1955. It was sort of the plan of the apartheid government then. And they've been producing it ever since. They, because of decades of sanctions, they had to become really, really good at it. So they developed this really obsessive engineering culture that still runs the Secunda complex, the world's single biggest CO2 emitter. And they're trying to do something about that for a variety of reasons. I'm sure it's all just out of care for the earth. And also, South African government is putting in really big taxes on carbon emissions.
Okay.
And that might have something to do with it as well. On the ESG part of their website, I couldn't find it anywhere where they admitted to being the world's single largest CO2 emitter. But they did say that their goal is to be net neutral by 2050. Well, net zero by 2050. I guess it's the same thing, net neutral.
Mm.
But their goal, they've recently increased their 2030 goal from a 10% reduction of 2017 levels to 30% reduction of 2017 levels. Ask me how they're doing.
How are they tracking towards their, what do you call it? Their audacious, big, hairy, audacious goal?
Let's say it's a slow burn, slow.
You should throw it in the kiln then.
They should. Yeah, they got a lot of burning capability. I don't know why they're
Mm.
not burning. They're at about 5% reduction after
Okay.
8 years, and they've got 5 years left to get the other 25%. So who knows? Maybe they're going to cram it all in the last 6
It
months.
could be asymptotic. Maybe they've spent 5 years building things that will help them in the next 5 years. Who knows?
Could be. Maybe they're just hoping AI will solve it for them. Who knows? So they listed in Johannesburg in 1979, then on the New York Stock Exchange in 2003, spent the 1980s selling fuel to sanction hit markets that couldn't buy it from anywhere else. And then they started exporting their knowledge to Qatar in the 1990s. They've had a lot of problems, though. They've got a massive project in Louisiana called the Lake Charles Chemical Project, which ran, a little bit over budget. What's $4 billion between friends over budget, Tony? I think it was an $11 billion project, which is now looking at a $15 billion project. I like on their website, it said it's going to cost somewhere between 11 and $15 billion, give or take, something around that. That's an ethane cracker operation. It's down in the South in the US. There's a lot of crackers down there in the South, but this is a particular kind of cracker. This is an ethane.
Oh, dear. Oh,
Sorry,
uh,
I had to get
good,
that one in.
good thing this is the anti-woke show.
It's the anti-woke show. I can say whatever
Yeah.
I want.
You can what? You can say
It's
whatever
a,
you want. People don't
I
have to
can.
listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's an ethane cracker. It's a giant industrial furnace that rips hydrogen atoms off of ethane to make ethylene. So it takes C2H6, turns it into C2H4, which is the starting block for most plastics, apparently. So they ran over budget on that. They ended up having to do a 50% JV with an American multinational chemical company called LyondellBasell. They've had lots of other problems as well, like just a lot of explosions. In the last 21 years, they have had 23 on site deaths at the Secunda plant,
Mm.
which is a fatal accident rate, or an FAR, of roughly 2.2 deaths per 100 million work hours, which is roughly 2 to 3 times the international oil and gas industry benchmark. So, not doing too well, despite all of their engineering expertise on stopping their workers from dying. And that led to their CEO getting replaced in 2003, after yet another. 2021 was an annus horribilis. They had 3 separate mine site incidents. And the outgoing CEO, though, had a great name. His name was Fleetwood Grobler, which I got to tell you, out of all of the names I've heard in my entire life, I think Fleetwood Grobler is
Mm.
up there. It sounds like a Chevy Chase name from a Fletch film. Fleetwood Grobler. What a congratulations to Mr. Grobler, if he's out there listening in. He was replaced by Simon Baloyi, who's a process safety engineer. So he's been the CEO since April 2024. So they're trying to turn that around. But yeah, they've had a lot of problems over the last 20 years with this sort of stuff. And, delivering this ethane cracker project, etc., etc. How the money is sliced today, they have about 4 operating buckets. Energy, which is coal to liquids plus gas and marketing, is about 57%. Chemicals Africa, 37%. Chemicals America, 6%. And Chemicals Eurasia, 3%. They've got also a renewables thing. They're trying to do renewables. They've got a green hydrogen thing like Australia's Mr. Forrest, Andrew Forrest.
Mm-hmm.
So they're playing around the edges with all of that kind of stuff, but it's mostly still coal to liquid operations.
I did notice on
But
their website that a large part of the company is called Dyno Nobel. And so 2 questions for you on that. Does that trace itself back to Alfred Nobel? Because he, I think, was South African. And Dyno Nobel in Australia is an explosives company. It was owned by a chemical company in Australia called Orica. I think it may have just been sold. But there is an Australian company called Dyno Nobel as well. So I wondered what the link was there, if you've come across it.
Dyno Nobel. No, I didn't come across that in my notes. Where did you see that on their website?
Oh, and their business breakdown. I think it may be the name of the chemicals business.
Oh, okay. If I look up Wikipedia for Dyno Nobel, it just talks about the explosives company founded in Sweden by Alfred Nobel. Headquarters,
Yeah,
Brisbane,
there it is.
Australia, and Cottonwood Heights, Utah.
Right.
Wow.
Well, there is, if you look up the Sasol website, one of their businesses is called Sasol Dyno Nobel.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
No, don't know. It didn't come up
Okay.
in my notes.
Okay.
I've probably been to Cottonwood, Utah. It's in Salt Lake County. Spent quite a lot of time in Salt Lake. Anywho, back to my notes. Where am I here? So, very low. So I should have said at the beginning. So this is another one of these companies on the New York Stock Exchange that doesn't report in USD. It reports in ZAR, the Rand in South Africa. But I did all the conversions, and interestingly, the scoring didn't change for anything once I converted it. Our IV scores, but it still prints a lot of cash. It's the main thing I like about this. It doesn't score very well in Stockopedia for stock rank or quality rank, but it throws off a ton of cash. So it's got a very low prop CAF. I think single digits. We'll get into the actual figures later on, but it's an ESG nightmare, but it's generating a lot of cash. And for new listeners, do you want to explain the QAV policy on ESG investing?
Yeah, well, so I said this on the Australian show when we talked about Sasol. We just produce a buy list of companies that score well, and it's then up to the individual investor whether they want to buy that company or look on. And we don't take a position on whether it's a good company or a bad company or whether investing in this company is good or bad. It's up to the individual investor. And that's a plus, I think, for QAV, because you're managing it yourself. Because as we spoke about in the Australian show, there are ETFs out there which are calling themselves ESG ETFs. Oftentimes they're just the index with a few stocks removed, and they charge you a lot of fees for that pleasure. So you're getting index-like performance at best and paying more than an index fund. Whereas if you do it yourself, you can decide whether you wanted to. You might like all these kinds of companies, and you might put together a portfolio of value stocks that are anti-woke. That's fine. It's up to you. We don't take a position. We just say, here are the numbers, and create a buy list, and then it's up to you whether you want to buy this stock or an ESG stock or, stocks which are in the defense industry or any particular filter you want to place on it yourself. We don't have a position. We just say, here are the stocks that score well. Go ahead and put the portfolio together yourself.
But what about your position on ESG? Buying ESG stocks or buying oil, let's say that, or mining stocks.
Yeah, so we've had this discussion before as well. My position is that I would buy them. I don't know much about Sasol, so I'd have to have a good look at it. But I would buy oil stocks or coal stocks on the ASX because I think you can't just turn the lights off overnight. The replacements for energy production just aren't there yet. Might be down the track, but at the moment there's got to be a transition path between, keeping industry going, keeping ourselves warm and well lit and fed, through to the day when we can have completely renewable energy sources. But we're not there yet. So I'm happy buying these stocks myself personally.
And the other argument I've heard you make over the years, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that when we buy shares on the market, these companies don't get, unless we're buying a new listing or a new issue or something like that, they're not getting our money. They don't get the money. So we're not funding their operation. We're not perpetuating their operation. We're an individual buying a share off another individual or off another fund or whatever it is. So we're not encouraging the business. We're not financially supporting the business. We're just buying a share.
And possibly buying it from someone who's selling because they don't want the ESG issue in their portfolio.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We do profit from them doing well, but we don't provide them with any capital to grow their business.
Yeah. So back to this company. They're an ESG nightmare. So it's one of the reasons why I think they're cheap. They're carrying a lot of debt, but they're sitting on 1.9 billion tons of coal reserves that they have access to in South Africa, apparently, which will keep them going for a while. They've got a 70-year learning curve in this whole coal to liquid process that gives them a bit of a competitive advantage engineering-wise over competitors. Not that they have many competitors in the CTL space outside of China. And they sell a lot of petroleum, synth gas, synth petroleum to South Africa. I think they cover about 20% of South Africa's demand. They're protected by a regulated price in South Africa as well, which is interesting. I wish we were protected by that here. Petrol price here has been insane. It went up 25% in a week. I filled up my car one week, it was like $1.75 or something a litre. I filled up the next week, it was like $2.25 a litre. I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
How's that possible? Anyway.
And the oil price hasn't gone up that much all that quickly.
What else? So, yes, so they got a lot of debt, 120 billion ZAR net debt, which is, divide that by 20 to turn that into USD. So about, what, 6 billion US? Is that right? 10 divided by 10 would be 12, divided by 20 would be 6. That's 6 billion? Yeah. And a lot of that's coming from the Lake Charles kerfuffle. They haven't issued a dividend since 2020. Their CO2 footprint is bigger than Portugal's, and the rand has got some FX issues. My old IT guy used to be in South Africa, and they had like constant grid blackouts all of the time. He'd be offline for a day here, a day there, or hours here. So the sort of problems in South Africa with supplying power, and I guess that impacts these guys in some way, shape, or form. But, the other thing is the South African government are really kicking up the penalties for being a carbon emitter, and the next round kicks in next year, 2026. So these guys are going to have to start paying a bigger hike or buying more trees, something like that to offset. But it's gonna be a hit to their numbers, but not a huge hit. I got some notes on that a bit later on. But from the numbers, the key numbers for us, price to operating cash flow is about 1.4 times. So very low. They've got issues, and they look dirty on paper, but very, very cheap from a prop CAF perspective. Their F score is 6 out of 9, not as good as the EDU you just talked about, but pretty solid from an F score perspective. And the price to book is 0.39 times. So very, very low. What else have I got for you? There's a lot of things we could look at. If they pay off their debt, if there's a rebound in polyethylene ammonia spreads, it could lift their earnings out of Lake Charles. There's if they come up with a better CO2 abatement plan, they could unlock some ESG investment. There's a lot of things like that, but that's all prediction and forecasting that are really of no use to us. But some of my analysis uncovered potential upsides in those things. Red flags are really higher CO2 taxes or stricter South African emission laws, which are going to force them to continue to spend money on heading towards net zero or getting down to that 30% level that I mentioned earlier on, or more blow-ups at Secunda, or more problems with Lake Charles that could nuke their cash flow. But the punchline is really that they're an ugly duckling refinery, I think. Sort of a classic value buy that we've seen a lot over the years that we've been doing the Australian show, just out of favor with a lot of funds because it's such an ugly duckling. It's not a woke buy because of all of the CO2 that they push out. The apartheid thing is probably in their past. Just in terms of what we scored it on, price less than or equal to IV1, yes. Price less than IV2, yes. Price less than book, yes. Less than book plus 30, yes. Price to operating cash flow less than 7, yes. Petrovsky score better than 4.5, yes. Fails on quality rank, fails on stock rank, fails on book value growth being positive, fails on growth over PE greater than 1.5, does have a 3-point uptrend, has a new 3-point uptrend, but fails on yield being greater than bank debt and passes for IV2 being greater than twice the current share price.
Wow.
So the QAV score is 0.51, which is a pretty good QAV score. Yeah. But, it's sort of a hold your nose buy, I think, if you were going to buy it. It's not very ESG friendly, and but it's the reality, as you said before. South Africans need to get their power generation from somewhere. They've got enough problems as it is. So these guys are providing a lot of that. And they are working hard to, it seems, 5%. Maybe it's not evident in their results. But I believe everything they say on their website, Tony. They are trying super, super hard. They're big believers.
Seems like they do the old things really well and the new things not so much. Changing to ESG and building a plant in the US.
Well, they are, I don't know how environmentally good or bad ethane cracking is really. I imagine if you're having to, post-process things that intensively is probably a lot of flow-on negative.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends if they're creating ethanol, which is a cleaner fuel than oil. So,
yeah. But I don't know in terms of ripping the hydrogen atoms off the ethane. What the trickle down carbon emission impact of that is. Don't know.
Me neither. But the last point too, I think we should say is it's a commodity stock, obviously. So I was not sure whether we should track it as a coal stock or an oil stock, but they're both buys at the moment, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They're both buys, and these guys, I guess, fit into there somewhere. I don't think we have a commodity for synth gas or liquefied coal, but I guess it ties into those pricing somewhere. I mean, I don't know if we track the commodity price in South Africa and if we would have to do that for these guys, seeing as there's some sort of regulatory price controls around it there. Anyway, in terms of it on our checklist, I think it makes sense to look at as a value investment. Again, it's sort of the classic ugly duckling, out of favor, but and has a lot of operational problems, but is still sort of has a monopoly on what it does, has a moat, and is generating a ton of cash and is very, very cheap.
The question. We've done a number of overseas pulled porks. I'm guessing this is an ADR as well on the New York Stock Exchange. And I'm wondering if that's playing into some of these stocks being value stocks as well, if that stops some locals in the US from buying them. Be interesting to get someone to tell us that from the US, what their experience is with ADRs.
Right. Yeah, we went through that a few episodes ago, didn't we? The sort of reporting complexities, the paperwork complexities with ADRs for American investors. Yeah, all right. I'll see if I can get someone to come on and talk to us about that in a future episode. But you're right. That's probably one of the factors with these as well. When I'm going through our buy list each week looking for companies to buy, I'm looking for companies that are different to the ones that we've talked about in the past. And just a lot of them tend to be foreign-based companies, it seems. I don't go deliberately looking for them, but they just do I go, oh, okay, that's a bit different. Where is it? Oh, South Africa. Okay, great.
Yeah, no, I get that.
All right. Well, that's your stock tip to look at this week. If you're looking for a value stock in the US market, take a look at Sasol, but do your own research.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Cam. Thanks for the pulled pork.
Thank you, Tony.
Happy NYSE.
Too late.